The CEO of Wells Fargo makes a statement in a company memo, a June company memo, Charlie Scharf. While it might sound like an excuse, he says, the unfortunate reality is that there is a very limited pool of Black talent to recruit from. And the firestorm ensued, right? There were many people who thought that that very statement was totally inappropriate to hear from a CEO. And after that firestorm, we see not only an apology from him personally, but an apology from Wells Fargo. And in a statement on its Twitter page on September 22nd, the CEO says, I am sorry, my comment has been misinterpreted. The financial industry and our company do not reflect the diversity of our population. We at Wells Fargo are committed to driving change and improving diversity and inclusion, end quote. He goes on to say, there are many talented, diverse individuals working at Wells Fargo and throughout the financial services industry, and I never meant to imply otherwise. It's clear to me that across the industry, we have not done enough to improve diversity, especially at senior leadership levels. And there is no question Wells Fargo has to make meaningful progress to increase representation. His apology was to the entire company in a memo that says he made an insensitive comment reflecting what he says, quote, my own unconscious bias. Hi, I'm Marcus Holmes, and this is HR Passion Moment. HR Passion Guy is on Passion Fridays. And we promise on Passion Fridays to bring you passionate people and or topics that you might find great passion about. And there has been a lot of passion around the comments made by the CEO. In some parts, we have called it Black Twitter has gone mad, and Twitter in general has certainly responded, and across social media platforms have responded with their displeasure and, for some like me, disdain with some comments that I think probably would by most be regarded as reckless. And so I wanted to talk about this topic because I think there are lessons for Wells Fargo, and some of them I'm sure they have learned on this journey, and what lessons from Wells Fargo that I think that we should tap into. I'm just going to tap into the various platforms to encourage you to join us. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. It is about 71 degrees here on the northwest side of Detroit, and it's supposed to be a sunny 80-degree day. Drop in the comments where you are. What's the temperature like there? I want to get that as we check in with you on various platforms just to see who is checking in with us. I want to make sure that we're live on all of our platforms. Right, let's just take a quick look. Right, checking in with you across all platforms. Thank you so much. Those of you that are tracking with us, just drop in the comments where you are. See a few folks on our Facebook platform. Thank you so much. A few folks on our YouTube platform. Thank you so much. And if you drop your names, I will definitely be able to see who you are. Valencia Etner, it's been a passionate week. Brenna Lawson and Valencia have both joined us. It has certainly been a passionate week, filled with all kind of passion. Of course, Breonna Taylor, the results that are happening have happened in Kentucky so far, and hopefully the push for more federal involvement in an investigation and some clarity around whether or not the Attorney General has any familial connection now to Senator McConnell that's been floating around quite a bit. So you're right, Valencia, very passionate week. And I'm just checking in on LinkedIn to say hello to the LinkedIn community of folks that might be joining here. Just the layout is a little different these days, so I'm just trying to, there we go. All right, looks like we're good. Fantastic, thank you so much. All right, and I hope that whomever is, if you'll drop your information in the comments, that'd be great. And so I wanted to just, as a way of starting, Marcella Brewer, hey there. I wanted to ask, just as a start in this discussion, and if you're interested in joining me live on this discussion, drop a note in the comments and we'll send you the link to join us live. But I'm just interested in a part of the statement that I read, and I want to highlight it. It's an important lesson I think that we all can learn from the CEO of Wells Fargo. Again, I think there are lessons from this encounter and lessons for Wells Fargo that I think are both important. And so their CEO, Charlie Scharf, said in part in an apologetic memo, a memo of apology, which I think I'm very glad to hear, that was disseminated Wednesday. He says he apologizes for making an insensitive comment reflecting my own unconscious bias, he says, end of quote. So I want to ask you about unconscious bias, though some might argue it could have been a very conscious bias, but we won't argue that today. We will say this unconscious bias. I want to ask you about that. And I want you to drop in the comments your response to this. I'm going to mention a few words or names, and I'd like for you to drop in the comments what those words or names evoke, whether they evoke sentiments of something positive, a memory, and I want you to drop it in the comments, okay? University of Michigan. So whatever comes to your mind when I say those words, University of Michigan. Just drop it in the comments. University of Michigan. Drop it in the comments. Harvard University. Harvard University. Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys. National Association of African American Women. So I've dropped several names. I've asked for you to participate by dropping in the comments what any of these names, what sentiments, words, emotions, thoughts come to mind, the first ones that come to mind, especially. University of Michigan, I said. Harvard University, I said. Dallas Cowboys, I said. National Association of African American Women. Drop in the comments. What do any of those or all of those, when you hear those, what do those mean? What emotions, what thoughts, what words come to mind? Ann Arbor, thank you, Diane. Elitism, thank you. Are you saying Black? Blech. I may not know what that, you may be teaching me a new word. I'm not sure. But you will agree that each of those, and I'll give you some more moments. I've got some folks on LinkedIn like Diane Kenyatte. Thank you so much for coming. I hope that you will click share so someone else, I think there's a share function. Yep. That someone else from LinkedIn will join us, and the other two folks that are here on LinkedIn that I can see. I can't see your names though. If you'll drop in the comments just to let me know that you're tracking with us. We love to know that you're here. And then I see a few on Facebook, a few on YouTube. If you'll just engage with me and drop in the comments. I mentioned a couple of different things. I mentioned University of Michigan. I mentioned Harvard University. I mentioned Dallas Cowboys. I mentioned, I'm chuckling at Diane's comment, yep, for the Cowboys, it's a sound. Got it, thank you. Thank you so much, help me out. And I mentioned the National Association for African American Women. Those were things. So I wanted to get, what's your first thoughts on those things? Your first thoughts on those things. Your first thoughts. Okay. Now I'm thinking, I have a few more words that I want to get your thoughts on. Community college. Community college. Drop, what's the thoughts that come to mind? Single mom. Single mom. Like single mother. Single mom. Inner city. Inner city. Community college. Single mom. Inner city. Drop in the comments. What do those words evoke? Oh, I love it, Diane. Community college equal access and equalizer. Necessary for many. Valencia Etner. Thank you both. Thank you, Valencia, for chiming in. I'm just trying to get, what do these words evoke? What thoughts, what sentiments? Community college. Single mom equals warrior. Donna, my mom. Thank you for that, Diane. What a warrior mom she must be. Some outstanding, fantastic girls. I'm going to say girls. She probably thinks of you girls, but you're women. So no disrespect there. But I'm sure she's thinking, what warrior women I have helped to bring into this world, right? Inner city. Inner city. So now I want you to envision yourself as the decision maker, the hiring manager, the person, decision maker who would determine who would be awarded a contract. And among their resume are any of these words. And so without much conscious, you have already formed an opinion around their background, right? Oftentimes, because U of M is a top school, we ascribe everything to it as being a top school, right? As being the top of something, right? We hear University of Michigan and people say, go blue, right? And the people who are voting for Ohio State or Michigan State or some other school sees it as a rivalry, right? That's already part of your unconscious, right? Or if you applied to the University of Michigan and didn't get in, right? You might feel some kind of way about seeing it, right? Without much conscious thought or effort, you have formed some opinion and ascribed that, projected that on the people who hold degrees from there, or who work there, or who have gone there, or who have played on those teams. They get an up or down, right? It would be the same for Harvard, wouldn't it? If someone on the resume said that they graduated from Harvard, Harvard School of Divinity, Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, Harvard University, you might ascribe a certain level to them, and you might say elitism, right? You might already have formed that if you see that as the school that that person has come from. You might in your mind be formulating they're going to want more money. So if you have a limited budget, you might be wondering, how do I get this Harvard trained person for my budget, right? Unconsciously, you've created this bias, right? And let's talk a little bit about the community college, right? A lot of times people don't look at a community college as what Diane says, an access and equalizer for some that may not have gone to a traditional four-year school or might be re-engaging education and learning, right? We might think of it as a lesser opportunity. And if we see it on a resume of some sorts, we might discount it. Thanks, Diana. I hope so too. I believe it will be. We might discount it, right? If someone is answering an interview question, and as a former recruiter, I can tell you there are many number of times when a person is answering a question and the example that they're giving is something more personal than professional in an example for a given response to a question, especially a behavior-based question. And she might say, as a single mom. So if I have an unconscious bias about what that single mom means, her score might be impacted by her revealing that she's a single mom, where through her being a single mom, she may have gained transferable skills that will drive business results for the bottom line in my company. But if I have some bias about single parents, that could be an issue. Or I said the National Association of African Americans Women. I don't even know if that exists. I made that up, I must admit. But if you see on a resume that someone's a member of the National Association of African American anything, if there's a bias, you may mark them up or down. So bias isn't only down, it could be up. If someone's a member of your fraternity, you might give them a leg up in an interview, even if they don't measure up. And if they're in a rival fraternity or sorority, right, you might give them a leg down. All of that centers around this theorem of unconscious bias, right? Now, it could be conscious if you or I determine that we're going to use that bias to give preference or refrain from giving preference to any group that would be affiliated with that specific preference, or that would be rival to it, right? And so really, the lesson that I think we take from, one of the lessons that we take from the Wells Fargo statement, where he says this reveals his own unconscious bias. So CEOs need to hear and understand that we all have both conscious and unconscious bias. And before we speak in our positions of authority and power, we have to come to terms with reconciling what is the best business outcome and what is the right thing to do for the goodwill and commonwealth of our world, to disavow the power of that bias from the decision or platform that we're getting ready to use. It's an important lesson because there is a lot of talk around diversity, inclusion, and equity. And it is similar in my mind to racism in that you can't legislate the hearts of people. You can create policies and laws that help to hold people accountable, but you have to at some point address the mindset, which is the elephant in the room. The mindset of this CEO is that there isn't enough Black talent. Now, I think that's an exposure problem, and we'll get into that in a moment, but I really believe that this, for the CEO, is a revelation around his thoughts about what Black talent is. I want to just let that set in the room for a second as I look at across platforms, and thank you for those of you that are here. It's important, those that are in leadership in any capacity, that you disavow yourself, your personal beliefs that are unreconciled when you're making these platform discussions and decisions, and take the time to reconcile your conscious and unconscious biases. So I wanted to bring that to our attention so that we can say, the reality is we all have some biases. We all have, whether tall means something to us or short means something to us, or skinny means something to us, a full figure means something to us. We have biases more than preferences. We will treat people differently based on how we have couched these biases as a part of our methodology, our practice, and I like to call it as part of our individual constitution. And so when you're taking your individual constitution into a collective responsibility, you've got to reconcile that individual constitution to ensure that you're not operating out of your bias, that you're aware of that bias and the potential impact it could have on the business decisions that you need to make. I want to just share for a moment. I'm going to share the screen from this the recruiter talent acquisition. You got to get the right one up. Let me make sure I'm getting the right screen up to you. Okay. All right. Hopefully you're seeing something that says recruiting funnel. And I had the privilege and pleasure to speak with a diversity council representative out of Chicago, Illinois, who's working on improving at their seniorship level more diversity. There is one female, there are no African Americans, and they want to start there, and then with the thought that it will hopefully trickle down throughout the organization. And one of the things that I advise to them, and I would advise to you, it starts with the mindset. For instance, the Wells Fargo mindset of the CEO. So have the CEO, a great lesson for him is, now you need regular unconscious bias training, and you need then to do that for everybody in the C-suite and give yourself a real commitment and put some numbers to that commitment. And those numbers may vacillate, but put some commitment to those numbers so that you can move the needle on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we say move the needle, but you can't just throw money at the needle, nor should you just hire a diversity chief of diversity and not empower him or her with real power to move the needle toward your targets. But this recruiting funnel, I shared with them, and it's public on the web. It's even one that you could use as a template. I would say some of the lessons that I want to share with Wells Fargo and any CEO, anybody that's in a position of power, when you talk about this funnel is after there's been a mindset shift, right? You have to have a shift in your mindset around what you're going to do differently to engage more, hire more, train more, develop more, promote more persons of colors, right? Or BIPOC, we might say. Black people, indigenous people, people of color, that you're going to work to promote more. It's a mindset. And you got to address those conscious biases and unconscious biases where you say there isn't enough Black talent, or maybe you're saying there aren't enough talented Black people. And that is an awareness issue. internally and externally. And so I want you to look at awareness is how many Black people out there know about your company and your reputation and brand as being one for a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. Because if you're not that or becoming that or aspiring to become that, you are already off the radar of people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. A Black, Indigenous, or person of color that is looking for an organization as such is looking for an organization that is already on the journey to being more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. So you're not even on the radar. Your name is out there, your commercials are out there, your logo is out there, your brand is out there, but it is saying, maybe silently, awkwardly silently, you are not welcomed here. And you need to hear that if you are in business, that you have a brand presence as small as you may think it is, or as large as you may think it is. And your brand presence already is speaking as to whether or not you are a diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplace. So your goal is to raise the awareness that that is who you either, number one, are, or number two, are aspiring to become. So Wells Fargo needs an awareness campaign about who Wells Fargo is aspiring to become. If they have less than 4% African Americans in 2018, which is, I believe, one of the statistics that I believe that I read. And not them alone, the finance industry, the insurance industry, and a number of other, the tech industry, you must have a brand strategy that authentically reflects that you are aspiring to become a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. And it would bid you well if there are members in your organizations who can serve as brand ambassadors who would align with that, to be public, to say, I work at Wells Fargo, I'm African American, and there is a place for African Americans to grow, thrive, and flourish within this industry and within this organization. Because if your folks internally are not saying that, and you create a brand externally, it is really colonizing. It is putting the white picket fence up when everything behind the scenes is awry. So that awareness internal is some internal discussion around what it feels to be Black, Indigenous, and a person of color within your organization, and whether or not that reconciles with the values that you profess are the values that carry you forward into the marketplace and cause you to thrive. If they're not, there is some reconciling that has to do. So not only a reconciling for the CEO about his own unconscious bias, but about these behavioral anchors within the organization that are telling us that at guideposts and turns, at water coolers and cubicles, that there is bias and unconscious bias that's operating in the organization. So it's an internal awareness and an external awareness around our organization is aspiring to become more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable. And if you're bold enough to say, and we're doing it 20% each year, we're committing that 20% of our promotions, our hires, our mobilization within the organization, how we move, the mobility will be BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. That gets the attention of an African American who may not have applied to a Harvard. Because in our inner city and products of single moms, some of them may not even have aspired to engage with the Wells Fargo, engage with Harvard or University of Michigan. And they are some of the most gifted, talented, and brilliant that our generation has to offer. But the exposure of welcoming, the exposure of opportunity, of access is not there. So once you have this mindset of diversity and inclusion and equitable consideration in your organization, then you can work on a brand strategy around awareness, both internally and externally. You need brand ambassadors internally who understand the messaging that should be shared and who live it. But if that awareness does not live internally, it will soon extinguish externally, no matter how much money you throw at it. I want you to look at consideration a little differently. I want you to look after people are aware, after people understand your brand strategy, what can you do to get people to consider passive candidates, passive people who may not, now they're aware of you, but they're not considering working at your company? What can you do to elevate the voices of diversity and inclusion and equitable considerations for those persons that are passive candidates? That's the person who has the skill sets to drive business results at your organization. They have what you're looking for, but they're currently not looking to make a move. They are just looking around. They're not looking to move today. They're not looking to buy today. What can you do to get them to consider you? And what are you doing to consider them? Have you built a talent ecosystem that seeks out in non-traditional places that maybe you don't often go to? I think this pandemic has caused us to pivot, but there are many online opportunities that, you know, we could have done a job fair and it would cost us several dollars to set it up, tons of dollars to set it up at a college in another state, right? But now we can do some of those things online. And so we go to the Harvard, right? Maybe because it might have the program that we're looking for, or we go to Purdue if we're looking for an engineer, maybe. But where are the non-traditional places? Are there Black engineering associations, right on LinkedIn, by the way, that you have overlooked to make a monthly networking event live here on LinkedIn so that the Black Engineers Association can show its talent to organizations, and organizations can show their inclusive workplace to passive candidates who may not be looking today, but who may be looking tomorrow? What non-traditional places? Churches, fraternities, other organizations that might not be industry specific, where there might be talent. Where's your ecumenical partnership? NSBE. Thank you, Lori Wesby. Help me out. Where's your partnership? So that you're seeing the talent. You have a line of sight to both the talent that exists and the talent that is being developed. And again, non-traditionally, where are your relationships with the workforce organizations that are in about every city whose program is about skilling, upskilling, reskilling individuals in that community to be contributors in industries across society and the world? You cannot consider only traditional modes of communication and exposure and expect different people to find those pathways and portals. So when I'm saying consideration in this context, are you considering where passive candidates are so that they can consider you? And maybe not today, maybe it's a year from now, but building a talent ecosystem where people come and you grow it and they come to learn more about you and more about the industry and the opportunity to see you transparently as you go this journey of a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. Then I want to go to interest. I think we think if we become the number one organization in our industry, in our niche, depending on how you want to say it, that people will come. To some degree, they will. But there are people that you have an interest in, right? So the consideration of interest in the context of diversity, inclusion, and equitable consideration has to shift. It is to be a part of that shift. If our interest has traditionally been in people who look like us, who think like us, who worship like us, who buy like us, who consume like us, then we cannot expect the kind of wellspring of diversity that we say that we want. We have to shift what our interest is. That interest has been in people who we say fit, but most of the fit is like us. And most times we regard adversely anyone that is unlike us. And so the interest consideration, both in talent acquisition and in talent development, has to change from what you are interested in into how do we broaden our interest in the common goal of driving business results. Now, one of the easier paths to that, right, is to look at the composition of your customer base. Is your customer just like you? And if you had the opportunity, if that answer is yes, and you could expand and grow 20% of the market share that was unlike you, would you align people on your team to help you grab that market share? Would it be worth that? So in most instances, the customer base is not just like you. And if you want to upsell them, expand your offerings to them, or expand your reach through them, you might want to think about how do we reflect the interest of our customer in our employee base, in our workforce. The consideration of interest has to be turned almost on its head, because for every person, we have who we want as what we think they will measure up to the cultural fit, right? We use that word. But cultural fit is supposed to be around values. And values are supposed to be around driving business results, not driving personal preference or unconscious or conscious bias. I gave earlier for people to drop in the comments a couple of things relative to what thoughts come to mind when you hear University of Michigan or you hear Harvard. What thoughts come to mind when you hear community college, or when you hear single mom, or when you hear Dallas Cowboys, or the National Association of African American Women? I made that one up. What thoughts came to mind? And some of you dropped different comments. Some of them reflected things that might be regarded as positive, some maybe not so positive. So think about application, not just access, right? Because we're in a very technologically savvy time, right? Almost everyone has an online application, right? And so access to that application isn't maybe as much an issue. Is it access to the organization? When we're applying to an organization, and because there could be 1,000 people, how are you in your application process looking to glean and understand and get a line of sight of the talent of BIPOC people? And what you may find out about BIPOC people, and it may sound like a generalization, is that they're very communal and social people. Hearing that and thinking about ways that you might put that in your process, which will be the cost of your time, is to get hiring managers involved in your talent ecosystem and hold networking events. I know networking is not a word that people like to hear, but people of color like the point of touch. And if you do a Zoom function with 50 people at a time with a hiring manager to just be in the room and engage and answer questions, ask questions, make a presentation about the business model, You will find that applicants talk to other applicants about their experience, the candidate experience. And so, in that very way, you drive the engagement at the applicant phase with people who may or may not walk into an application with a good exposure to you or good sense of who you are. In the comments, change will come when people of that CEO's mindset are put out to pasture. Old white men typically think as he does and makes it easy for them to dismiss the facts. Talent is there. Thank you for sharing that. James Arnold has joined us. If people are truly looking to build inclusive talent base, that's not hard to do. And so, Lori, I appreciate those comments. I think the part that's hard is it's the unconscious bias, right? I don't want to just put the traditional white CEOs out to pasture. I want them to shift. And it's a tough shift. It's tough to shift if your thought of Black people, Indigenous people, people of persons of color is that they are whatever. You can fill in the blank. But whatever that is, it doesn't equal a talent opportunity for your organization. That mindset does have to shift or does have to, as you say, wind out of the organization. But our hope is that those persons in power, because the reality is the CEO and the C-suite are all not persons of color in a lot of instances. And so it's got to be a shifting of the mindset about what Black talent means, what Indigenous talent means, what persons of color, what that talent means. Then for selection, this is one of the areas, and we're at 1244, that I happened to talk to this firm in Chicago about pretty in depth. It is the method by which they select hires, right? Select people for the shortlist, right? And a lot of companies have moved to 100% interview. That interview is the determining factor as to whether or not you hit that shortlist. For some, there are different subjects and they're weighted, right? And so it could be a review, intensive review, hopefully, of your training, experience, and personal qualifications separate from an interview. Could be any review of any samples of writing or work or sketches or drawings or whatever it would be, right, that go into this selection. And with the city of Detroit, there is written in one of its rules that in that selection criteria, Detroiters and veterans get preference points. Okay, they get preference points. If your organization really wants to change and you create the shortlist, and along, we'll talk in another one, the inner workings of a recruiting funnel as to how people move through the funnel a little differently than what we have talked more about. The branding aspect, you see it says recruitment marketing and not as much as this application selection and hire. We'll get a little bit more into the, and bring some colleagues to talk a little bit more about that funnel. But making sure each part of the funnel is equitable, right? Get you a better short list. That's the goal, right? We'll get to a short list, but if we don't start with a mindset shift, expose more people to be aware of our organization, consider more people more broadly, shift our thought about interest, our interest in candidates and what that looks like, their interest in us and what that looks like. Move from just thinking application is about access to application is about experience, and immersing yourself in the experience of BIPOC individuals, that they're more communal, that they want more personal touch, that there's more personalization desired to be able to see who the hiring manager is. I think tools like LinkedIn and Zoom are great tools if you can go live and showcase some of the hiring managers so that they get maybe not as much one-on-one time as to let any of that bias creep in, but that they get the opportunity, kind of a macro opportunity somewhat, to engage with people that have an interest in the organization. That drives the experience of applicants. But once you get to selection, if your commitment is that you're going to do a 20% African American hire or persons of color hire or Indigenous hire throughout the organization, then you develop a policy and procedure that shows what that means, that our candidates being considered equal, we're going to select a person of color 20% of the time, if that's your goal. So if you have a short list of 5, and a lot of times a short list of 5 means that the hiring manager could select any of these 5 persons. If that hiring manager does not select a person of color, or that unit or that division or that region or that office doesn't select a person of color, that diversity council kicks in to say, okay, here's our numbers. And we haven't lived up to our 20% or our 40%, if you're being bold. And this presupposes that every sliver of the funnel, every level of the funnel has built into it a lens for diversity, equitable consideration, and inclusion, that it is built in, so that your short list is already the result of you having a special lens on diversity, inclusion, and equity. So that short list is to yield you a BIPOC person 20% of the time. I'm saying 40. I challenge this organization to be bold and do 40. And that's the challenge. And then that hiring manager has a touch point with the diversity council on that hire. Meaning you looked at how equitable is the salary coming in, and how equitable is this hire among your team. So is this the first person on your team that is a BIPOC individual? And then do we need to do some type of engagement with the team to be aware of conscious and unconscious bias, so that we can ensure the quality of hire, the success of this person, their time to productivity is increased, so that we prepare for that hire. These are lessons that I think Wells Fargo could stand to learn from. And I think we have learned yet again that people lead with conscious and unconscious bias, and some so comfortably and with so much automaticity that they are even aware that they're doing it on the largest platforms, in the C-suite, in the boardroom, on social media. And so I think we can learn from that lesson, that we all have conscious bias and we all have unconscious bias. And before you stand in that seat, in that position of power, before you wield that power, before you pen those words, before you speak on your platforms, before you write it in a memo, reconcile regularly that unconscious and conscious bias, because it will show up without you even thinking that it's there. It's important that leaders take to heart the amount of bias that they have and work to disavow it from the practices, strategies, and policies that will drive business results. See, there really isn't a lack of Black or Indigenous or people of color talent. We have failed to be aware of them, consider them, be interested in them, engage them through an application experience, select them, and hire them. And if you're looking to find them, if your HR team is not helping you to find them, I'd love to hear from you so that we can help you reach out to them and build pathways and portals for Black talent, Indigenous talent, persons of color talent in your organization, not only for the common good, which is the best thing, but it will drive business results every time. I'm Marcus Holmes, the HR Passion Guy. Thank you for tuning in to our Passion Fridays, which emanates from our LinkedIn platform, but we are streaming through Restream on our Facebook platforms, on Twitch TV, YouTube events. You can follow us at any of those places. And I hope that you will click share and share this content widely. We'd love to have you come talk more with this topic, because we will be talking more on this topic about BIPOC talent, we will call it. There is great talent out there, and there is talent yet to be developed. And we are behind the 8 ball if we're just waiting for the talent to walk in our door. There are partnerships and opportunities to help develop talent right underneath your nose. And every corporate citizen who really is thinking conscious capitalistic, conscious capitalism, really understands that you've got to invest your resources in a place that is going to give you a return, right? But that is also going to return to the communities and communities of color, so that people see that you really are invested in the communities that you serve, be it business to business or business to consumer. Both of those customers want to know that you're invested in the communities that you serve. No better way than help to cultivate the talent in those communities that is right under your nose. And my friends, in this world, our under the nose has become under the global nose, because people can, in a large sense, work from anywhere. I'm Marcus Holmes. I hope you will follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Love and Stuff, follow us on Facebook, Twitch TV, YouTube. Thank you so much. We're at 12:53. I'm going to go to the comments before I close out. Eunice Hunter has joined us. Thank you so much. My corporate experience is the shift doesn't happen. All right. So we got to, I'm calling on organizations, Lori, like the national, all of these national associations, but organizations like SHRM and organizations like NAAAHR and all of the national Black associations. Where are we in organizations putting the position and pressure before these people in power to ensure that there is a shift? Because we're in a time and shift, Lori, I think you will agree, where customers want to see that the organizations that they buy from have shifted. And I think that's why you're hearing so many people in this allyship row, I call it, because people are now saying, I want to be seen as that organization. So now I think the strategy has to include a collective of these organizations saying, here's what you're saying and here's what you're doing. And we're willing to partner with you so that you do more of what you say, and work on the organizations that aren't saying anything at all. Well, it can happen. Thank you for being optimistic, because we are all products of our environment, and those who hold positions of power who are of a certain generation and non-BIPOC in corporate, their unconscious biases to overlook or underestimate and perhaps over-promote white mediocrity, perhaps. Lori, I concur, and I think you're spot on with that. I think, again, our interest has been, I was having this discussion with that organization in Chicago. Our interest has been the people that are like us, right? And so in one example, when it comes to closing a deal, a person was penalized because he wasn't as aggressive. He was penalized as being subdued. Well, African-American men, a lot of them in the corporate environment, have been taught and groomed to be subdued. And what it has forced some of us to do is do relationship building, so that outside of the meeting, outside of the deal, we close the deal. And if you don't recognize that as a strength, you will, in a performance evaluation, list it as not a strength, where the person that is aggressive might be a bully, might be considered as obnoxious, and maybe people just let obnoxious behavior go. But if you recognize it for what it is, you might say, here's the standard. You have to make, the competency is developing rapport with customers. Maybe that's a competency. Maybe that's something that we say is what drives business results in our organization. But how you do that and how you regard doing it successfully has to change, because you might be promoting the person who doesn't do it successfully, costs more money to do it, if that's part of the success consideration, costs more time and resources to do it than the person who might take 7 days longer to close the deal. So maybe there's a cost benefit in that analysis, but you got to find a way to ensure that the way that you are promoting and grooming and developing and who gets exposure and stretch assignments and opportunity, that you take a second look at all of that, and a third and a fourth, hopefully with something similar to a diversity council, which was one of the recommendations for a couple of the organizations involved in the endeavor. Yes, I can personally say I've had experience where I have been both an angry Black man and coined as an angry Black man. There have been times I've been mad as Hades as a Black man in America. And there are times where whatever I said prior to was regarded as angry. My passion, no pun intended, drives me to a certain level and a certain way that I might articulate something that someone else will say, why are you angry? Not understanding how persons of color interact and engage, and how you are causing them to quelch being their authentic selves and the best of themselves because you regard it as not being emotionally intelligent. Every Black man is not docile, but many are trained to be. And that is rewarded, though it doesn't always drive business results. And it doesn't always build effective relationships. So you got to really get to the skinny, if you will, of what drives business results and what values do you have that are aligned to that, and whether or not those values should live on. Because if they are not aligned to driving business results, they might be wish lists, but they really shouldn't be values. Your values should drive business results. And whether that is getting customer share or giving to the community, positioning yourself so you can give and build up the community, that drives business results. And we spent a lot of time building competencies and values hinged on biases. I invite and encourage CEOs and organizations to disavow the bias, meaning be aware of it and reconcile it before you go into making these statements, processes, and strategies to drive business results. It's 12:59. It's been a great hour for Passion Fridays. Hey, let me know if you enjoyed it. Drop it in the comments. Share it with others. Share broadly and widely. And we will see you next Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, right here on Passion Fridays. Thank you all on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitch TV, on YouTube. Thank you so much. Have a great day and a grateful weekend.